Operating system structure. Simple structure. Many operating systems do not have well defined structures. They started as small, simple, and limited systems and then grew beyond their original scope. Example MS DOS. In MS DOS, the interfaces and levels of functionality are not well separated. Application programs can access basic input output routines to write directly to the display and disk drives. Such programs can access basic input output routines to write directly to the display and disk drives. Such freedom leaves MS DOS is a bad state and the entire system can crash down when user programs fail. Unix OS consists of two separable parts, the kernel and the system programs. The kernel is the further separated into a series of interfaces and device drives. The kernel provides the file system, CPU scheduling, memory management, and other operating system functions through system calls. See the figure. Now let us see layered approach. The OS is broken into number of layers levels. Each layer rests on the layer below it and relies on the services provided by the next lower layer. Bottom layer 0, layer 0 is the hardware and the topmost layer in the user interface. A typical layer consists of data structure and routines that can be invoked by high level layer. Advantage of layered approach is simplicity of construction and debugging. The layers are selected so that each user's functions and services of only lower level layers, so simplifies debugging and system verification. The layers are debugged one by one from the lowest, and if any layer does not work, then error is due to that layer only, as the lower layers are already debugged. Thus the design and implementation is simplified. A layer need not know how its lower level layers are implemented, thus hides the operation from higher layers. See the figure. A layered operating system. Disadvantages of layered approach. The various layers must be appropriately defined, as a layer can use only lower level layers less efficient than other types because any interaction with the layer 0 required from top layer. The system call should pass through all the layers and finally to layer 0. This is an overhead. Now let us see microkernels. This method structures the operating system by removing all non-essential components from the kernel and implementing them as a system and user level programs, thus making the kernel small and efficient as possible. The removed services are implemented as system applications. Most microkernels provide basic process and memory management and message passing between other services. The main function of the microkernel is to provide a communication facility between the client program and the various services that are also running in user space. Benefit of a microkernel. System expansion can also be easier because it only involves adding more system applications, not rebuilding a new kernel. Mac was the first and most widely known microkernel and now forms a major component of Mac OS X. Disadvantage of microkernel: performance overhead of user space to kernel space communication. Now let us see modules. Modern OS development is object oriented with a relatively small core kernel and a set of modules which can be linked in dynamically. Modules are similar to layers in that each subsystem has clearly defined tasks and interfaces, but any module is free to contact any other module, eliminating the problems of going through multiple intermediary layers. The kernel is relatively small in this architecture, similar to microkernels, but this kernel does not have to implement message passing since modules are free to contact each other directly. Example: Solaris Linux and Mac OS X. The Mac's OS X architecture relies on the Mac microkernel for basic system management services and the BSD kernel for additional services, application services, and dynamically loadable modules. Kernel extensions provides the rest of the OS functionality resembles layered system, but a module can call any other module resembles microkernel. The primary module has only core functions and the knowledge of the how to load and communicate with other modules. Now let us see virtual machines. Demonstrate the concept of virtual machine with an example. The fundamental idea behind a virtual machine is to abstract the hardware of a single computer, the CPU, memory, disk drives, network interface cards, and so forth, into several different execution environments, thereby creating the illusion that each separate execution environment is running its own private computer, creates an illusion that a process has its own processor with its own memory. Host OS is the main OS installed in the system, and the other OS installed in the system are called guest OS. See the figure. Virtual machines first appeared as the VM operating system for IBM mainframes in 1972. Implementation. The virtual machine concept is useful. It is difficult to implement. Work is required to provide an exact duplicate of the underlying machine. Remember that the underlying machine has two modes, user mode and kernel mode. The virtual machine software can run in the kernel mode since it is the operating system. The virtual machine itself can execute in only user mode. Benefits: able to share the same hardware and run several different execution environments. OS host system is protected from the virtual machines, and the virtual machines are protected from one another. A virus is guest OS will corrupt the OS but will not affect the other guest systems and host systems. Even though the virtual machines are separated from one another, software resources can be shared among them. Two ways of sharing software resources for communication are to share a file system volume part of memory, to develop a virtual communication network to communicate between the virtual machines. The operating system runs on and controls the entire machine. Therefore, the current system must be stopped and taken out of use while changes are made and tested. This period is commonly called system development time. In virtual machines, such a problem is eliminated. User programs are executed in one virtual machine and system development is done in another environment. Multiple OS can be running on the developer's system concurrently. This helps in rapid porting and testing of programmers' code in different environments. System consolidation. Two or more systems are made to run in a single system simulation. Here, the host system has one system architecture and the guest system is compiled in different architecture. The compiled guest system programs can be run in an emulator that translates each instructions of guest program into native instructions set of a host system. Para virtualization. This presents the guest with a system that is similar but not identical to the guest's preferred system. The guest must be modified to run on the para virtualized hardware. Example: VMware. VMware is a popular commercial application that abstracts Intel 80 into 86 hardware into isolated virtual machines. The virtualization tool runs in the user layer on top of the host OS. The virtual machines running in this tool believe they are running on the bare hardware, but the fact is that it is running inside a user level application. VMware runs as an application on a host operating system such as Windows or Linux and allows this host system to concurrently run several different guest operating systems as independent virtual machines. In below scenario, Linux is running as the host operating system, FreeBSD, Windows NT, and Windows XP, and running as a guest operating systems. The virtualization layer is the heart of VMware as it abstracts the physical hardware into isolated virtual machines running a guest operating systems. Each virtual machine has its own virtual CPU, memory, disk drives, network interfaces, and so forth. Now let us see the Java virtual machine. Java was designed from the beginning to be platform independent by running Java only on a Java virtual machine JVM, of which different implementations have been developed for numerous different underlying HW platforms. Java source code is compiled into Java bytecode in .class files. Java bytecode is binary instructions that will run on the JVM. The JVM implements memory management and garbage collection. JVM consists of class loader and Java interpreter. Class loader loads compiled .class files from both Java program and Java API for the execution of Java interpreter. Then it checks the .class file for validity. Operating system generation. Operating system are designed to run on any of the class of machines. The system must be configured for each specific computer site. Cygen program obtains information concerning the specific configuration of the hardware system. Booting. Starting a computer by loading the kernel bootstrap program code stored in ROM, and that is able to locate the kernel, load it into memory and starts its execution. System boot. Operating system must be made available to hardware so hardware can start it. A small piece of code. Bootstrap loader locates the kernel, loads it into memory and starts it. Sometimes a two-step process where boot block at a fixed location loads the bootstrap loader. When power initialized on system, execution starts at a fixed memory location. Firmware used to hold initial boot code. Now let us see process management. Process concept. A process is a program under execution. Its current activity is indicated by PC program counter and the contents of the processor's registers. The process memory is divided into four sections as shown in the below figure. The stack is used to store local variables, function parameters, function return values, return addresses, etc. The heap is used for dynamic memory allocation. The data section stores global and static variables. The text section compares the compiled program code. Note that there is a free space between the stack and the heap. When the stack is full, it grows downwards, and when the heap is full, it grows upwards. Process state. Illustrate with a neat sketch the process states and process control block. Process state. A process has 5 states. Each process may be in one of the following states. New. The process is in the stage of being created. Ready. The process has all the resources it needs to run. It is waiting to be assigned to the processor. Running. Instructions are being executed. Waiting. The process is waiting for some event to occur. For example, the process may be waiting for keyboard input, disk access request, inter-process messages, a timer to go off, or a child process to finish. Terminated. The process has completed its execution. See the figure. Process control block. For each process there is a process control block which stores the process specific information as shown below. Process state. The state of the process may be new, ready, learning, waiting, and so on. Program counter. The counter indicates the address of the next instruction to be executed for this process. CPU registers. The registers vary in number and type depending on the computer architecture. They include accumulators, index registers, stack pointers, and general purpose registers along with the program counter. This state information must be saved when an interrupt occurs to allow the process to be continued correctly afterward. CPU scheduling information. This information includes the process priority, pointers to scheduling queues, and any other scheduling parameters. Memory management information. This include information such as the value of the base and limit registers, the page tables, or the segment tables. Accounting information. This information includes the amount of CPU and real-time used, time limits, account numbers, job or process numbers, and so on. Input-output status information. This information includes the list of input-output devices allocated to the process, a list of open files, and so on. The PCB simply serves as the repository for any information that may vary from process to process. See the figure. CPU switch from process to process. See the figure. Process scheduling queues. Yeah, as the processes enter the system, they are put into a job queue which consists of all processes in the system. The processes that are residing in main memory and are ready and waiting to execute are kept on a list called ready queue. This queue is generally stored as a linked list. A ready queue header contains pointer to the first and the final PCBs in the list. Each PCB includes a pointer field that points to the next PCB in the ready queue. Ready queue and various input-output device queues. See the figure. A common representation of process scheduling is a queuing diagram. Each rectangular box in the diagram represents a queue. Two types of queues are present, the ready queue and a set of device queues. The circles represents the resources that serve the queues, and the arrows indicate the flow of process in the system. A new process is initially put in the ready queue. It waits in the ready queue until it is selected for execution and is given the CPU. Once the process is allocated the CPU and is executing, one of the several events could occur. The process could issue an input-output request and then be placed in an input-output queue. The process could create a new sub-process and wait for its termination. The process could be removed forcibly from the CPU as a result of an interrupt and be put back in the ready queue.